I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Canada.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to speak of three matters. Firstly, the question of the veto. Second point, the humanitarian situation in Syria. And third point, the obligations of the members of the Security Council. The facts on the ground, the humanitarian needs that are growing, the obligations under international humanitarian law, and the massive support of the international community cannot be clearer. And yet, a resolution extending humanitarian access for a period of 1 year was blocked at the Security Council in pursuit of a political agenda. I should like to have said that this was a surprise. However, this is the 17th Russian veto on a resolution on Syria since 2011. And this is a part of a far broader strategy alongside the Syrian government to control, to deprive, to punish, and to benefit from a part of the people for their own perceived gains and for the advancement of political agendas. As I have said in this hall less than a year ago, we continue to stress the paralyzing consequences of abuse of the veto. This is anti-democratic and it is anachronistic. I wish to take a moment to thank colleagues from the missions of Ireland and Norway. They spoke before me this morning. And despite all of this, despite all of the difficulties and obstacles, they have been assiduously endeavoring as co-penholders of the Syrian humanitarian dossier, alongside other members of the Security Council, who united to support a renewal, a 12-month renewal of the cross-border mechanism. I should like you to know, distinguished colleagues from Norway and Ireland, that we continue to support you in your efforts.
This single vote in the Security Council stood in stark contrast against the resounding and united chorus of voices from the majority of the Security Council, from the UN Secretariat and its agencies, from humanitarian partners, and from civil society. There's been some talk of politicization today. How inappropriate that talk is. These are respected international organizations reflecting the best instincts of humanity. Nothing political about it at all. A simple declaration that said the extension of this lifeline needed to be for at least another year. The Secretary General, not a political figure, not a figure who's subject to partisan influence of any kind whatsoever, a representative of all of us, the executive officer of the United Nations itself, called on the Security Council to extend cross-border access for a further 12 months at a minimum. This, he told us, in his own words, was a moral and a humanitarian imperative. We also heard directly from partners who pleaded for the same, who told us that they needed the 12 months. What is most disheartening is that Russia's cynical veto was cast against a backdrop of rising needs, record levels of food insecurity, and an accelerating economic and social crisis in Syria. The country has been in a state of civil war since 2011. By now, we all know these numbers, and they've been recited again today. Nearly 15 million Syrians who are in need of humanitarian assistance. More than 4 million people are reliant on humanitarian assistance in the Northwest. And as has been pointed out, more than 80% of these are women and children. And finally, over 2.5 million Syrians are reached by cross-border assistance each month. So, Mr. President, while we welcome the extension until January, and we welcome the fact that food and vaccines and other vital aid is allowed to continue to reach those most in need, I want to make it very clear that it is Canada's expectation that the Security Council will renew the cross-border mechanism in 6 months' time, and it will do so on time, without any politicization, and without any political games, and without the unjust and unjustifiable use of the veto to prevent humanitarian aid from reaching the people who need it. This is not something we are suggesting, we are urging, or we're calling on the Council. This is what we expect from the 15 members of this body who act on our behalf, the greater UN membership. In discharging their duties, we expect Council members to act in accordance with the purposes and the principles of the United Nations, and yes, of the Charter. There's been much talk of the Charter today. The Charter speaks of state sovereignty. Of course it does. But it also speaks of human rights. It also speaks of the rule of law. Let us not confuse friendship of the Charter with friendship of aggression or friendship of impunity. We have to understand that the Charter speaks of many things, but it is not, this body is not simply a group of countries that got together under no umbrella of the rule of law, under no umbrella of human rights, with some notion that all countries are free to act at their will, however they want, whenever they want. That is not what the Charter is about. And those who speak of unilateralism, this year, what more grotesque example of unilateralism do we have than the unprovoked aggression against an independent sovereign state, the state of Ukraine, by the state of the Russian Federation? And so it's in this same vein that we want to remind all parties to this conflict of their obligations under international humanitarian law, that all parties are obligated to facilitate the rapid, safe, sustained, and unimpeded humanitarian access to all Syrians in need. Resolution 2254, adopted by the Security Council, also calls on the parties to immediately allow humanitarian agencies rapid, safe, and unhindered access throughout Syria by the most direct routes, and allow immediate humanitarian assistance to reach all people in need, in particular all besieged and hard-to-reach areas. We don't think that cross-border is or should be the only modality through which humanitarian assistance is delivered to the people in Syria's northwest, but we also have to understand that over 800 truckloads a month go through Bab al-Hawa. And this dwarfs the five cross-line convoys that have been allowed to be deployed since August of 2021. The cross-border mechanism is essential if we're going to, in fact, provide the humanitarian assistance that everyone, with some objections, but everyone else sees this as the critical priority for international intervention. We're proud as Canadians that our country has provided over $600 million in humanitarian assistance since the beginning of the conflict. We are going to continue to provide that assistance, and we're also going to continue to support a long-term sustainable political solution to the conflict in line with Resolution 2254. So Canada is going to do its part without hesitation and without any quibble on our part. It would be nice to see the Council do exactly the same thing in January to ensure that the people of Syria who are in such dire need continue to be provided with the necessary assistance. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Canada